Hey there, welcome to the session and thanks for tuning in. Also, a very big thanks to the user pilot team for the invite. I was excited when I received it, and I'm looking forward to share with you today some of the learnings that I've had over the years. My name is Andrew Michael. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Avrio. I'm also the show host of Churn FM, and I was previously head of business intelligence at Hotjar. And today, I want to pose a question to you during this talk, and hopefully, it will make sense by the end of it. But really, I want to challenge the notion and ask you, is data analysis and UX research killing your business? And to pose this question, I'd like to draw an analogy to our health. And sometimes, there may be days when we wake up, we're not feeling great. We try and understand, what's going on with us. We have a few different symptoms, and it might start out with something like this. Like we get onto Google and we just start searching, my stomach hurts. But more often than not, we probably get responses like this: did you mean cancer? And at the end of the day, are we really getting good research? Are we really getting good insights into this? Or is just Google telling us who does the best job at SEO when it comes to it? So this is like a first attempt when we go out trying to understand the market, trying to see what's out there, trying to learn about our customers, but not really actually speaking to them or speaking to anyone or using any form of data analysis. Then we might say, okay, I'm going to book a trip. I'm going to go to the doctor. And we arrive at the doctor, and doctor goes ahead and asks a few different questions. And he might say, okay, or she might say immediately, your stomach's hurting, your thumb is sore, we're going to need to amputate. I don't think anybody out here would really just after asking a few questions, be willing to amputate their thumb. We just don't do that. We would go and get a second opinion. We'd want to be getting some analysis, some results. And at the same time is if you just decided, I'm going to skip the doctor visit today. I'm actually just going to go and get some blood tests, and that will tell me how I'm feeling. And you get the results back, and it shows that you have type 2 diabetes. You're not immediately going to go on self-prescribing yourself and going putting on insulin. If maybe somebody had asked and it explained to you what not to do, they would have said don't stuff your face full of cake before you do your blood tests. And a lot of times as well, when we're going about self-diagnosing ourselves, we just don't go and choose one channel where it's the sort of qualitative feedback and asking questions and how you're feeling and what you're going about. And we also don't just go ahead and look at blood results and then base off all our prognosis of that, because ultimately, these decisions, they can be life or death, and we treat them very, very seriously because of that. And when we're going out and we're trying to diagnose how we're feeling, what it's about, it's a process. We go and we look at our symptoms. We see how we're feeling. We might go and see the doctor. The doctor might ask you a few questions. Does it hurt you? What are you feeling? From there, they also maybe sometimes want to send you for further tests to figure out what it might be. Very, very rarely will somebody just give you a diagnosis on the spot and tell you this is what it is, this is what you got. We're trying to get a full picture of our health, trying to understand both sides of the surface. So what are we feeling? What can we explain? What is the data telling us before we're making those decisions? But more often than not today in business, this is exactly what we're doing. We're jumping on a piece of feedback, or we're running a data analysis report and then just immediately going saying, aha, this is what we need to be doing next. This is what we need to be building. And very often as well, within companies, these teams and these processes are very, very disjointed. So what most companies look like is on one end, we have data analytics or business intelligence, and typically quite a sizable team producing reports, building dashboards, putting together analytics. And on the other end, we have your user research, UX research, typically a smaller team, less resources invested in the space, and they're very disjointed. The one is not communicating with the other in most cases. And essentially what we're missing out on is getting the full picture from your team. And the irony is both teams pretty much have the same mission always. It's some form of blah, blah, blah. We're here to provide insights to our team to enable faster decisions with maximum impact. And ultimately, this is what is the practice of both fields, is really about decision science. Is how can we give the information to our team that they need to effectively make the best decision possible? And going back to the sort of health analogy is how can you make the best decision if you've only got one side of the data? Like, how have you, if you've only got the feelings, like what are we feeling, what are we seeing, and you don't have the actual analytics and the data behind it to indicate like what you're actually feeling. So the second thing is like they organize themselves in the same way. There's only really three ways that teams typically organize themselves when it comes to user research or UX and data analysis and BI. Is there's an embedded model where you might have an analyst or researcher working with specific product squads. You have a centralized model where they receive requests from different teams throughout the company, and then they work on the analysis or the research from that side. Or then there's a hybrid model where you have sort of the center of excellence for the team to come back and share findings together, but then embedded throughout the organization in specific squads. So, I mean, it's one of these three models. Typically, most organizations, this is how teams are organizing themselves. And the processes are the same. Like, we go through data collection. On the one end, whether it's qualitative data, we're doing our user interviews, we have surveys. On the data collection side, we're putting together sort of like server-side analytics, web and mobile analytics. There's a layer of data cleansing that happens in both sides. We do transcription services, NLP. We have data enrichments and setting up ETL processes. Then we have a data analysis layer where we are either delivering self-serve analytics or allowing you to like query databases. And on the other side, then we have presentations and sheets and docs where we're presenting. And ultimately, like all of this comes to the end of it where it's about distributing insights to the team. So the processes and the workflow is very, very similar on both ends. Yet, why do we still keep things separate? Like when it's so clear that having the what together with the why really delivers the gold at the end of the day. Like being able to understand what is happening and then be able to explain why that is happening is a much, much more powerful impact than just looking at data and saying, okay, we can see that activation drops off at week 2. Yes, that tells you something, but does it tell you why they're dropping off? Like you need to speak to users to understand that. You need to understand what are the reasons that they're not sticking around? Why haven't they been? And that's what really informs decisions and like what to do next. And it works both ways. So sometimes you might hear something in a user interview and think, oh, that sounds super insightful, but is this a representative sample of my users? Is this a typical behavior we're seeing? And that's something that you can go back to data and analytics for and say, okay, like, can you help us out? Can we see, like, is this how big of a problem this is? And to give you a couple of examples where I think this can go very wrong, where it's just having an isolation is, I'm a new parent. Fairly new parent. I have a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old son now, and my Spotify playlist looked something like this before Kai was born. And I used to love Spotify. Like, I think for me, the daily mixes really always sort of nailed the mood that I was in. I really, really enjoyed the service. And about a couple of months in after Kai was born, my playlist went to something like this, where it was daily mix was Cocomelon, Cocomelon, Cocomelon. And if you're a parent, like you're probably feeling the pain as well. You know, understand what it was for me. And I sort of lost part of me with the Spotify playlist having a child. And on one end, like if you were to just look at the data side of things, you would say, okay, wow, like actually my usage of the product went way up because I was using these for like bedtime stories and for to soothe him to bed in the beginning. So maybe when my listening hour went like 3-4 hours a day, it might have gone up to 16 because it was just playing on repeat. And then I was presented like, obviously, like it looks like I'm super interested in this music. Yes, from the data side, yes. But actually just asking and understanding like, why has this usage increased? Like, why is the sudden change in music itself changed so dramatically? Is it like really that time that into kids' music, or is it something has changed in my life? And I think from a moment now where like personally, I stopped using Spotify for a very long time because this sort of just destroyed the experience for me. And it eventually like leads to possible reasons for churn. It could have actually been on the opposite, and it could have been a really wow moment. Like it could have been like, hey, we just noticed like you've changed dramatically in your listening behaviors. You all of a sudden listen to kids' music. We have a family plan. This might be something better suited for you. Retain what you love about Spotify and still enjoy it for your newborn that's joined the family. So one example where like just trusting data alone and just running off scripts and algorithms to produce that sort of experiences for users can be costly on the other side. And another one I think is a great example, really, like just going out and looking at data is Starbucks in Australia sort of had a very, very big setback when they did very, very little research into the actual market themselves. And in 2018, they had to shut 61 stores and $143 million in losses for Starbucks. And like, from Starbucks, in their defense, they probably said, okay, Australia, big market, big growing coffee culture. Starbucks is successful all around the world. We can just go in and open up stores and we can make things happen. But what they failed to do was actually get on the ground, speak to users, try to understand, okay, like, what is this coffee culture? Why do people go? And they'll quickly realize sort of like the relationships that people developed there was they were with the baristas. Like, it was a place to go and socialize. It wasn't sort of a fast food sort of model where it came in and perhaps like going into the market, easing themselves in a little bit slower than like just bombarding every corner and making the experience a little bit more personal could have helped them avoid such a costly mistake. And this is just something like trusting previous data, seeing how they launched in different markets, seeing, okay, maybe Australians operate in a lot of ways like Americans. This should just be a plug and play model. Before making assumptions, like, go and speak to users, go and try and understand, okay, like, are there any cultural differences? Are there any differences that might impact us rolling out or launching in this new sector or this new market? So another case where just like not speaking to users can be extremely costing and only relying on data alone. And so maybe hopefully by now I'm making a good case that it's really, really important for these teams to be working closely together to inform each other's hypothesis. And you might say, okay, like, how do we go about starting? We're not going to go ahead and just build this team together from scratch where we're combining our analysts and user researchers in a single team. You might already have infrastructure in place. You might have teams and structures that will just be very, very difficult to move immediately. But the best place to start is really just getting the teams together around shared hypotheses, shared projects, where you can start off and bring together an analyst, product manager, user researcher, and really sort of define, like, what are you trying to understand or what is the hypothesis, and then use your different methods together. So go off and collect the data that you need, conduct the user interviews. If you're seeing any sort of trends in the user interviews, push that to your analyst and say, okay, can you look at this data? And vice versa. You're seeing something interesting in the data, like maybe ask these couple of questions on your next interview and have a much more collaborative approach to research and analysis. And eventually, ultimately, then on the other side as well, like the data analysis process, quite similarly, like the transcription services you're using, the notes you're taking, business, make sure these are being shared. So then ultimately you can produce these reports together, distribute these insights containing qualitative and quantitative research, giving the team the full picture when it comes to what are your users doing and what the behavior expected and what is really going to have that maximum impact for your business. And don't take my word for it. I mean, all the cool kids are doing it. I mentioned Spotify in this example, but actually Spotify is one of the teams that are really, really leading the trend on using various mixed methods and triangulating data analysis, data science, and user feedback to really create meaningful and impactful decisions for their business. And actually, if you do a LinkedIn search, there are over 60,000 titles with the word insights in them alone, where really teams now are starting to realize the value of having user research and data analysis working together, and rather keeping them in their individual silos, really creating teams around them now. So this is definitely a trend, and I expect this to continue growing over the years, is seeing more and more of the qualitative and quantitative research practices being merged together, being able to tell the full story, being able to collaborate and pass backwards and forwards between each other to really help your team and your company understand how your users are experiencing your product. And hopefully this all brings together so that we can have the situation when we're doing our analysis that we can see trends and graphs like this that are giving you a healthy pulse of what's happening in your business, and ultimately helping to drive up your metrics, your analytics, and the overall ROI that you see from the practice in these fields. So that's it for today. I really enjoyed sharing the session with you. Obviously, this is a topic and something that I deeply, deeply enjoy chatting about. So if anybody wants to talk a little bit more about how these two practices can work closer together, how can you use mixed methods in your research, and how can you combine qualitative and quantitative insights to tell the full story, to be able to share these insights with your team for maximum impact, please, you can find me on LinkedIn anytime, Twitter as well. Just love to have conversations about this. Looking forward to hopefully speaking with some of you maybe later. And yep, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the session. Hope you took something of value out of it, and have a great rest of the day.